Hello, everyone. You are listening to the LP Magazine podcast, Inside Scoop. And I'm your host, Stefanie Hoover. So today, I'm talking with Jamie Kress from Sensormatic. And we'll be getting into all the nitty gritty about RFID, what's new, where we're headed, some common myths, misconceptions. So I can't wait to talk about this because, believe me, RFID is needed. And I don't know what is taking so long for all these retailers to implement it. But I'm so happy you're here, Jamie. Welcome. And you are the North America sales leader at Sensormatic. Can you tell us a little bit about your role?
Sure. I am, I'll say personally, I live in Cleveland, Ohio, work remotely like most of us do today. Try to get to one of our headquarters occasionally, which is either in Boca or Irvine to get some nice weather. I have been part of what is now part of Sensormatic's inventory business really for the last 20 years. It began as I was consulting for a very small startup. I quickly joined that team. They needed someone who knew something about retail. They had a really interesting technology around RFID. I was working for a retail consulting firm at the time. They brought me on board to teach them about retail. That eventually evolved into a venture-funded organization, which was later acquired by Tyco, which became Sensormatic today. So I have, for the last 20 years, watched this industry grow, albeit a little slowly at times. But now is what we're really seeing is the growth in the industry that we were expecting 10, 15 years ago. My team is dedicated to the North American market. We have roughly 7 folks in the market who are responsible for building new opportunities, growing existing opportunities, and really helping retailers understand how to use RFID.
So you've sort of been around since the inception, really, although RFID has been around for ages, it's not a new technology.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of recent improvements, but it's definitely been around a long time. But for some of our listeners who might be new to the field or maybe their companies haven't dabbled in RFID yet, can you just give us a little RFID 101 and explain the technology?
Sure. So it really starts with placing a tag on an item. So, and that tag can be in a lot of different form factors. That tag could be an adhesive label. It could be a hang tag integrated into the existing price ticket that retailers use today. We're seeing a lot of growth in sewn-in RFID tags in apparel. And then there's also dual technology tags that contain both RFID tags as well as the acoustomagnetic, all in the same hard carrier that you're used to seeing in those stores. So the tag itself is where it starts. And then that really moves to how you read those tags in a retail store or in the supply chain or a distribution center. Most typically, those tags can be read with a handheld, but we are seeing a significant growth in fixed infrastructure, which I'm sure we'll get to later today as we talk about putting readers at exits. But generally speaking, it's putting tags on products, using a handheld or using a reader on a wall to read all those items. So it used to take a retailer, some retailers shut down for a couple of days to do their annual physical inventory, can now be done every single day if they wanted in about 45 minutes, 30 minutes for some. Most retailers typically land around once a week or once every 2 weeks. So it's what I always tell folks is imagine having the ability and the data accuracy you have after a physical inventory. Imagine having that in your stores every single day.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing technology. Why do you think retailers have been so slow to adapt?
There's a lot of misnomers out there. So early when I was just starting, the caution was, that these tags must be too expensive. So we couldn't possibly put, at the time it was a 10 or 11 cent tag on every single item in our store. Tag prices have come down significantly, but not just the tag price, but also the capabilities of the tag. Years ago, we couldn't put tags very effectively on personal care items, for example. The technology has improved substantially, so now you really could tag just about everything in your store. So tag price really was an initial barrier. Usually what we find in most retailers is they have so many things coming at them at any given time. They want to put in a new point of sale system. They want to grow their omni-channel business. They want to put a new ERP system in. And where does RFID sit within those types of strategies? And once they start to see the benefits of RFID, they know that RFID becomes the linchpin to making their omni-channel system or process more effective or efficient. And oftentimes you'll see RFID initiatives fall under an omni-channel initiative. Maybe a retailer is going to roll out a new point of sale system, so they want to include RFID. So there's lots of different reasons, but I think just the retailers are faced today with so many different strategies and so many different things they're trying to solve that they don't know where RFID fits in that mix.
So, we hear in the news a lot that retailers are exaggerating their losses, or that they're crying wolf, so to speak, and even that shrink is stable over the last 2 years, and that this is from the media that's out there. I think now more than ever there is a huge need for better inventory visibility. From your perspective, why do you think that is important with business today?
Yeah, I mean, why it's important. I mean, first let me comment on the rumors out there that shrink is solid and not increasing. I from what I see, the retailers I'm speaking to, that couldn't be further from the truth. It is the number one issue that we see nowadays. It used to be that when we deployed RFID in a retailer, the first thing we went after was inventory accuracy using handhelds in the stores. And then, within a year or two into a retailer's journey, the loss prevention team got invited to the table and could look at how can they leverage RFID for the loss prevention business within a retailer. Now we're seeing a switch. We are being contacted every day by loss prevention teams within retailers saying, how could I leverage this technology? I'm hearing great things from Macy's and others out there who are leveraging RFID. How can we start an RFID program and then bring along the inventory piece after that? So I really think there's a switch that I'm seeing where shrink and the benefits that RFID can provide are leading the use cases as opposed to trailing the use cases. So I think, when we look at the business benefits across the board that most retailers are looking at, now, as I just mentioned, shrink is the number one thing we're trying to improve upon. But we're not just looking to try to improve it with, reducing shrink. We really want to take a look at how can we use the data coming out of RFID to do lots of different things, improve labor scheduling, determine what should be leaving, all those different use cases around shrink. But then we get into inventory accuracy. How can we make sure that we have the right product on the sales floor for the customers that are coming in? How do we make our sales associates more productive and more efficient and effective in their day-to-day tasks? So when they're going to the back to replenish, they know that they're going to the back for a small. They know they have that small in the back to replenish. They're not just being sent on a fool's errand into the back room. So we find that we get a lot of great feedback from store associates who have used RFID that say, hey, I can't imagine running a retail store without it now that I've had it in my stores. So I think the business benefits really do run the gamut, what retailers are looking for, but almost always it's how do I improve shrink? How do I improve the visibility to my inventory? And then how do I make my stores more efficient and effective?
Back in the day when I was working in retail and loss prevention myself, I think, some of the frustrations were, you'd walk in the back room and the item wasn't there, right? Mm-hmm. Or you're supposed to have 10 of something, and where is it? Is it out on the floor? Is it been stolen? Is it hidden somewhere in an incorrect slot in the back room? Have you seen effects like on a turn, merchandise turn? Is it improved? E-com fulfillment, buy online, pick up in store. I mean, there's probably a million different use cases, right?
Yeah. There's so many examples. As you're asking me the question, I'm thinking through all the different ways I want to answer it. So, if you just look at the experience in the store. So in historical days, the retailer, if their inventory was inaccurate, and they're showing in their legacy systems that they have plenty of inventory in the store, they're not going to replen that store. They're not going to send a new white t-shirt if they think they have 5 sitting in the store. And what has happened for years in retail is the stores are banging on their desks saying, we don't have it, please send us more. And corporate office is saying, yes, you do. We can see it right here on our books that you have that inventory. So clearing that up and releasing that frozen inventory, as it's called, to the stores makes the stores much more efficient and effective. When omnichannel came about and everyone started looking to leveraging the stores for shipping merchandise, what we found is that the retailers rushed to an omnichannel strategy, but they didn't have the inventory accuracy to back it up. So orders would go to a store where they think they have the items that are in that order. You would send a sales associate or a backroom associate around the store looking for that item. So now you've you've used time of that sales associate, and we have limited staff in the stores. So you've taken that one or two people in the store and you have them running all over looking for that order. In the best case, they find one of multiple items and they ship that and they move the rest of the order to the next store. So now you have split shipments. So when you improve the inventory accuracy in the store, you're not just helping the store associates, you're not just helping the folks who are walking in off the street to buy something, you're helping the person who was at home place the order and would love to have one single shipment arrive as soon as possible with all the items that they ordered. All those things stem from inventory accuracy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the folks that work on the front line, just making their lives easier is paramount right now. We have labor shortages, we have all this, these craziness that they have to deal with on a daily basis. If we could just make one thing easier for them, inventory tracking would be great, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Every time I've gone to a store and done a demonstration of what it can do, and you pull the trigger and you hear the beeps from the handheld, the corporate teams hear that and they're excited because they know what that means, but the store staff is just blown away by what they know what that means. They know when they get called in to do their annual physical count, what that means. And for them to be able to do that and know that when they do that morning, that they know what they have in the store, they love to be able to service their customers better.
Yeah, I mean, guess what? I bet you it would cut down on internal theft too, right? If I'm maybe an associate who's thinking about maybe taking advantage, if I know that store is being counted on a regular basis, I might be less likely to take advantage there.
We absolutely see that. I mean, with any new technology you put in to combat things like internal theft, you're going to see a reduction in internal theft, and then eventually they're going to see where they might be able to move around those. But we have many different examples of how RFID can be used to catch internal theft, whether that's just a reduction because they don't know what that technology can do. But we've also seen use cases of tracking merchandise out of employee exits, either in stores or employee exits in a distribution center, for example. We've been doing that for several years with several different customers. And you really are amazed by how much merchandise is actually leaving out of those employee exits.
Absolutely. You bring up a good point with DCs. I'm just wondering, even further up the supply chain from the manufacturer, do you guys get involved with that too?
We do. We have software and solutions all the way back to the factory. And that's been a huge growth area for us in the last 12 months. We really had focused in the store predominantly. And with the advent in the last 12 to 18 months of a lot of different retailers putting mandates out there for their product categories to be tagged, we're talking to a lot of those vendors, those folks who tag merchandise for retailers. And we're saying, as long as you're tagging this merchandise for your end customer, the retailer, you could deploy RFID in your distribution centers to make your own distribution centers more efficient and effective. We can make sure that when the source tagged items come into your distribution center, that we can do some audits to make sure that that's being tagged properly. So we're seeing a significant growth in manufacturers using RFID and understanding as well the loss prevention issues they might have that they weren't aware of previously.
Awesome. It's good to hear that people are taking advantage of the technology. So I want to dig into a little bit about what actually happens at the door when someone is walking out with their item. Traditionally we think about, EAS, electronic article surveillance, right? And the gates beep, kind of let's put it nicely, a stupid technology. It doesn't, it just beeps, right? Lets us know that there's something that hasn't been deactivated. Does RFID do something a little different than that, I hope?
Sure. I mean, the first question we get is, can you utilize RFID to alarm at the door? And the answer is yes, you can utilize that. The real value at the exit comes in what you can do with the data once you're capturing everything. And a lot of those items are going to be safe at exit. And a lot of those items, unfortunately, are not going to be safe at exit and shouldn't have left the store. So at its most basic, what you can do is capture what items have left so that you can replenish those the next day. I mean, if you lose something in February and your annual count is in November, there's some situations where those items that have been stolen aren't being replenished unless there's some, mid-year cycle count of some variety to catch those. So at its most basic, when you're capturing items at the exit, you're allowing yourselves, or the retailers are allowing themselves to be able to replenish those items. but you can begin to do lots of other things. We find that with an exit with an RFID read, tying that RFID read to video is really helpful for the investigators, for the retailers.
Oh,
we have found that getting those reads and looking at that data, we've been able to reduce the time to close a case with investigators, which used to take 6 months. We're now being able to close those, or they're able to close them as short as 2 to 3 weeks. Being able to tie that event to the video. But there's lots of different use cases once you see that exit event. There's returns, fraudulent returns. You see items come in, and we can look at those items and say, this item that's being returned, it was never sold. So the data that comes out of the information on that tag, either when it's leaving when it shouldn't, or when it's coming in when it shouldn't, has been really valuable to the retailers.
Do you have real-time alerting?
Real-time alerting is interesting because certainly alerting and being able to use that data is important. What you don't want to do is have them constantly reacting, and it's really the best use of the data is to post-event analysis. So if you want to have alarming, we can do alarming. You really want to dig into that data and see really what happened. The other thing you got to keep in mind is there's a couple different ways to look at that data. Some of the data is we're matching up a UPC that was rung up at the register with an EPC or electronic product code and RFID tag at the exit. That takes a little bit of analysis to make sure that you're lining those two things up correctly. If you're just matching an EPC read, an RFID read at POS to an EPC read at exit, things are much more easy, and you could probably be more apt to do real-time alerting with that scenario.
Right. The reason why I asked is that I think, retailers always, they want that instant gratification, right? And so sometimes that's not always the best way to go. And I like your point of, let's take some time, let's look at this, let's investigate, because we get distracted very easily by the shiny penny, I think. And when sometimes you need to slow down and really dig into the information that's there.
Yep. And I will say there's so much data, and we hear that from retailers a lot is, okay, we love the data, but help us. And so one of the things we really are looking into right now is how do we help them with the data they're getting to make the most use out of their cases? Because we don't want them spending time and effort, the investigators looking into a particular case and finding out, oh, that item actually should have left the store. It was okay. It was paid for. Oh, or that item was actually part of an omni-channel order. Didn't go through regular point of sale system. So that's okay. So there are cases where it makes more sense to do post-data analysis. And it also makes sense for us to scrub the data for the retailers to give them actionable investigations and not just tons of data to pour through.
Right. In the interest of, again, making the lives easier for the frontline associate, I'm thinking, okay, so a product gets brought back in, a customer returns it. How difficult is it to get that item back into the inventory using the RFID?
Seconds, really. Once you return that item, the next time you cycle count that sales for, that item is brought back into inventory. And a lot of retailers are utilizing what we call, most of the vendors in the marketplace call a track and trace capability. So we can see the life of that tag from the time really it was born at the factory. You can track that item and everywhere it's read through the distribution system when it was received. Maybe there was a store-to-store transfer that you could see going on with that item, all the way to it was sold and it was returned. So that track and trace ability to be able to look at an item and know where it was in its lifetime can be really helpful.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit. I'm super curious about this thing that you did at Auburn University. And I know Auburn is, and I have to reach out to them. If you have a contact there, I want to get them because we're digging more and more into RFID, and I'm excited that the college is actually doing something with us. Can you talk to us about this workshop that you did there?
Sure. And I'll tell you, Auburn and the RFID lab there, and Justin Patton, who runs that lab, they have been just a fantastic partner of ours for years. We have been on their board really since inception, and it's just proven, really helpful for us and for our customers. They've grown, I should point out, really substantially over the years. They really focused initially on store-based use cases and retail, and they've now moved into aerospace, food and beverage, all these other industries that are kind of exploding around RFID. And it's a great place to take customers to see not only what's possible, but where they might want to go in the future. They have they have robots, they have drones, lots of different things you can see for the future use cases. but they also can help retailers understand how to get started, which I think is half the battle. So what we did is we contacted, I want to say we had roughly 40 different customers come down to Auburn. And I will say that, we did this a couple of years ago, and we had a small group of retailers come to our offices in Boca Raton, Florida. Great session, sat down in a conference room and talked for a day and a half about what can you do with the data out of RFID at the exit. We reached back out to those customers as well as some other customers that we were speaking to or prospects. And we, within a matter of weeks, had 35, 40 retailers say, yeah, I want to come to Auburn. I want to hear from different programs that have already started. I want to talk about different industries that are now getting into RFID that weren't previously in RFID. And we spent a day and a half. We heard from Auburn. They spoke about how do you get started? What is a playbook for how you get tags on products? How do you support that? We talked about the things. We had a few folks who had been at DC the couple weeks prior on the Hill talking about legislation around RFID and around increased shrink and the dangers that are happening in retail. So we spoke a little bit about that. And really, it's a sharing of knowledge between LP professionals. We also had IT folks who were in the room as well. A sharing of knowledge of where everybody is in their RFID journey, what can they learn from each other. And we really found as we left the meeting, we had a survey, asked folks, they really want to keep that group together so they can continue to learn from each other, because everyone uses RFID a little differently. Mm-hmm. And there are little tricks that people learn and they want to share those tricks. We had one of our customers mention that one of the things they're starting to do is cycle count the delivery trucks after they get to their last stop. So once that delivery truck is at their last stop, you scan that truck. And if you find merchandise tucked away in the corners of that truck, you know there might be a problem with that delivery truck. So those types of use cases are typically not outlined at the beginning of a program. Those are what retailers are discovering they can do with RFID once it's deployed, and being able to share that across retailers and across verticals is really helpful.
So this program at Auburn, where college is it housed within? Is it like in a business college? Is it a analytics? How did this even come about?
Yeah, so I believe it's part of the business school. We'll have to double check that with Justin. It actually began at the University of Arkansas in the early days back when they were just helping out Walmart. And so Dr. Bill Hargrave, who was a professor at Arkansas at the time, started a lab. It really grew. He moved to Auburn, became the dean of the business school, I believe, if I have my history right, and moved on from there. So they moved the lab to Auburn and it grew from there. And we see there's vendors who are there. We take retailers there. Retailers can contact Auburn directly and go there on their own. It's just a great resource for anybody, whether you're a retailer or you're a vendor to a manufacturer to retailers, can go there, learn about the technology. And that's where I think I mentioned earlier about how we are hearing from manufacturers who are tagging for retailers. They learn a lot from Auburn, because that's where they're going and saying, gosh, it never occurred to me that if I have to put a tag on this product for Walmart or for Macy's or for Dillard's or whoever it might be, I could get some advantage out of that in my own distribution center, in my own operations. And Auburn helps a lot of those folks with that as well.
That's really cool. I see a field trip in my future.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to take you down. We'll join you down there.
All right. Awesome. I'm not an SEC fan, sorry, but I would go to Auburn and check that out.
We don't have to tell them that. We'll keep that quiet.
We'll keep that quiet. You mentioned IT as you were just speaking there, and I'm kind of curious. So, for many years, again, my experience in the field was that IT was always a real stopper, especially when there any program that touched any sort of infrastructure within the retailer. It's like the golden goose, right? IT is sort of, unapproachable at times with these programs. Are you seeing a change or sea change there at all with their attitude towards these programs?
Yeah, I have for sure. One of the things that we tell a lot of retailers is when you start an RFID program, our goal in working with the retailer is to keep it as simple as possible, keep it very focused, have a narrowed amount of KPIs you're looking for benefits you're looking for, because what happens invariably is everybody in the organization raises their hand and say, wait a minute, I can use RFID for this and I can use it for this. And the best way to be successful in a pilot is to remain very, very focused and then begin to slowly open up the gates once you've adopted the technology and add use cases. IT has typically been a really strong partner. What we try to do early on is have as few integrations as necessary. So how do we run a pilot and keep it as much of a light touch to IT as possible? So let them see what's possible, let them understand where it's going. And typically, we have to slow them down as we get to the end of a pilot, because the IT team is seeing it and saying, gosh, if I could just get a data feed of your cycle count and push that into my ERP system, now I'm allocating directly from what you all are reading every morning. So, we have found that most, if not all, IT organizations are big proponents. They have a ton of stuff on their plates. As I mentioned earlier, they're looking at POS systems, and they're looking at omnichannel, they're looking at WMS systems. So, when they resist, it's only because they are balancing all the priorities. But RFID touches so many things and can make some of those other systems more powerful. It's like giving a little turbo boost to those other systems. And almost every IT organization, when they see that, they want to adopt it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they're fighting right over it.
Right.
Different applications. And I hear what you're saying, especially when you're in pilot mode or test mode. The more variables, right, that you put in there, it's harder to then compare against your control stores to say, okay, this really had the impact. So what would you suggest to the retailer would be like 3, 4, 5 KPIs that they should focus on for a pilot?
Well, those KPIs will be directly related to the problem they're trying to solve, right? So if you look at a traditional inventory pilot where you're looking at improving inventory accuracy, I suggest picking a couple of categories that are most important and the ones you're having the biggest problem with, and looking at how you improve overall inventory accuracy. And you could compare that to control stores to say, in my RFID pilot store, here's my baseline, here's how it improved, and you compare that to your control stores. And then a lot of retailers will look at sales floor out of stocks. So do audits and look at how can I make sure that I maintain the best possible assortment on the sales floor, and I'm not experiencing any sales floor out of stocks. There's nothing more frustrating for a customer or an employee when you have none of a certain size and color combination on the sales floor, and that the product is sitting in the back room. In the early days of RFID, we did a lot of work. Everyone did a lot of work in the footwear industry, because it's easy to tag up the samples that are on the sales floor and look at what's in the back room and say, gosh, I'm showing this tennis shoe in red and blue. It also comes in black, but it's not on display. And if it's not on display, typically the customer won't even know to ask for it. So ensuring that you have the right items on the sales floor is important. We look at when you start looking at an omni-channel program, you want to look at what is my cancel rate on canceling orders that are going to stores. How can I improve that cancellation rate? How can I improve on the number of bounces that an order goes through as it goes from store to store to store, trying to be fulfilled for an omni-channel order? What's my cost reduction in split shipments? So I'm not splitting shipments in an omni-channel order. All those things are things we look at for a pilot. But then if you do a pilot from a loss prevention perspective, your KPIs and the things you look at might be a little different. So you might want to identify, what are my top 100 shrink SKUs? And what am I seeing at the exit that are going out the door? Am I actually seeing what I think to be the case in that store? Should I change my staffing during certain hours because I'm seeing from the exit that shrink on certain categories is higher in different times? So I try to align the KPI and the benefit you're going after to the initial problem you're trying to solve.
Right. So just curious, I love real world examples, right? So from the point of, let's say a pilot is successful in a retailer, how long does it take to roll out an RFID program?
That's a great question. So it really depends on the complexity of the program. So I mentioned at the beginning that it's a handheld and a tag. Some retailers put what we refer to as fixed infrastructure in a store. So that can be readers at the exit combined with video, like I mentioned. It could be hardware between the sales floor and the back room. We call those transition doors. So it's automatically tracking merchandise as it goes from back to front or front to back. There's some retailers who want hardware at the point of sale, so they get an RFID read at point of sale. And there's some who want readers at the exit. So it really varies pretty substantially how how complex those rollouts look like.
Okay.
But I would say the vast majority roll out with just simple handhelds, and that can be done pretty quickly. We've had retailers who have rolled out to 800 to 1,000 stores easily within a year. We don't find that it's typically the RFID vendor, or for us, that's the cog in the process. It's usually asking the retailer, how fast do you want to move? The other advent that's happened in the last 5 years, I guess, that's made those rollouts easier is back in the day when we first started doing inventory programs, we had to put up shielding between the sales floor and the back room to differentiate between those two spaces. That's no longer needed. We have what we call virtual shielding that really makes sure that through the software, you're isolating the sales floor merchandise from the backroom merchandise. So now that we have that virtual shielding, you don't have to go in and physically put up shielding in a store, and that makes the rollout substantially faster.
So you're basically telling the system, okay, we're inputting this stack of items into the stock room. It's a virtual stock room. You're telling the system where it's going.
I'm sorry, can you ask that one more time?
So you're telling the system when we first bring it into the inventory, it belongs in the back room. So that's your virtual stock room.
Well, we do it a couple different ways. When we receive merchandise, we automatically put that merchandise typically in the back room, though there are some stores in New York City and big stores where you're receiving on the sales floor. But most often you're receiving the back room, and you automatically place that in a back room zone.
Okay.
But when you're cycle counting with that handheld, you say, I'm cycle counting the sales floor now, and the system knows that the merchandise it's reading is in the sales floor versus when you're reading it in the back room. So we have algorithms built into the software that differentiates those items that are being read so that you can do the replenishment task. I probably glossed over that at the beginning. A replenishment task says, show me what's needed on the sales floor today I'm under my minimum quantity on the sales floor, and I have it available in the back room. And the software will say, these are the 100 items that you need to bring from back to front so that you're perfectly stocked before you open the doors.
And they're probably not wandering around aimlessly in the stock room like I used to do, looking for items, right?
Yeah, you can be directed. They have a Geiger counter or a find product feature that can take you directly to that item. And you can even coordinate that in a smart way so that as you're looking at a replenishment list, it's how you're walking your back room as well. Some of these back rooms are quite large, and so doing it in an intelligent way and directing you to certain aisles makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. So I put you on the spot here. Are there any customers that you can talk about specifically with success stories? Anything you can share with us?
Yeah, I think, we've had a lot of customers who have spoken publicly. A lot of our customers are known in the market. Certainly, you hear Macy's talk a lot about the program, the successes they've had from a loss prevention perspective at the exit, using RFID reads at the exit. I can speak a little bit about that. We've also had success with some of our customers like Victoria's Secret and Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger and some others. I think one of the most interesting stories, or one of the most interesting capabilities that has come out of using RFID is getting reads from fence locations and using what we call a track and trace tool to be able to go into a fence location, read those items that have been stolen and are sitting in a fence location underneath a barbershop or wherever that might be, reading those items and being able to understand where all those items came from. So you could go into one of those locations, read 20,000 items that are in that store, I use that term loosely, and identify where they were all stolen from. And you can see, gosh, these all didn't happen to be stolen from the greater New York area. These actually were stolen all the way down the eastern seaboard. We can see where that theft is taking place, and all that merchandise is being stolen and brought up to a fence location. So that's one of the most interesting uses, especially from a loss prevention perspective, of RFID. And we're seeing a lot of interest in that. Macy's was, I would say, the first. We have multiple customers who are using that capability now. And after our event in Auburn, we had 2 or 3 of the retailers who attended that and said, yeah, that's something we really want to get a handle on. And I'll say one more thing on that. Macy's has done a phenomenal job at leading the industry in what they do with RFID, and we're really thankful for that. Macy's is fortunate, and they have a large LP organization to support them. A lot of the other retailers don't. And so when I'm talking to retailers who have a smaller staff, we say to them, we know you have a smaller team. We understand that. That's why using RFID data is so important, because you now have the ability to comb through that data, look at your actionable cases, and take your limited LP resources and really direct them to the cases that you can close, and not just, trying your best to figure out where you should direct those resources.
It's such an effective tool. We hear about, total retail loss a lot now. I think just as we become better and better business partners, in the loss prevention team, to me, RFID it's just a no-brainer. To be able to share that information with the rest of your different departments in your company it's just invaluable, in my opinion. So I want to ask you just one final question here. I know you do a lot of different trade shows and things like that. Anything coming up where we could visit with you, stop by a booth, or get in contact?
Yeah, we will be at NRF for sure, and we have been every year. I'm sure we can post the booth number. Of course, I don't have that in front of me at the moment.
I happen to have it. It's 4865.
Thank you, 4865.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So we will be at NRF. Anyone can certainly reach out to me. We'll have demonstrations. We have a couple of our customers who have allowed us to take some customers into the store environment for some tours. So reaching out to me, reaching out to anyone from Sensormatic, we can certainly arrange that. We will have demonstrations of a lot of our solutions there, ranging from our traffic solutions to our RFID solutions, some computer vision. We'll also have a new loss prevention focused tool called Shrink Analyzer that will be there at the booth as well, which we can talk to and have some industry experts walk them through the benefits of that. So NRF is the best place to come see all that and hear from our experts.
Awesome. I'll look forward to it. I'm going to be there, so I'll stop by and see you all.
Fantastic. And then we'll plan our trip down to Auburn.
Yes, please. Let's do that. Let's do that. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Jamie, for teaching us all about RFID and where it's at today. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate your time. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here and talk a little bit about RFID. So I appreciate you giving me the time today.